Hi, I'm Alex Roman, Executive Editor for Metro Magazine, and welcome back to Metrospectives. Today, my guest is Andrew Cassidy, Senior Director of Digital Strategy and Engagement at Boston's MBTA, and host of the agency's award-winning podcast, Spilling the Tea. Cassidy joins me to discuss how the MBTA was able to set up a podcast to increase engagement with both its customers and employees, winning an APTA AdWheel Award, and much more. It was a great conversation. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoy. Andrew, thanks for joining me today. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thanks, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, thanks. I wanted to start a little bit, very exciting news with the MBTA winning an AdWheel Award for their podcast, Spilling the Tea, which also should get an award for good names. Um, just wanted to start first with, why the podcast was started and kind of what were the goals the MBTA had with it.
Sure. So we started ideating on creating a podcast shortly after I joined the MBTA back in 2019. We were at a point as an organization where we felt transparency was of the utmost importance. We wanted to do a better job of telling our story to our riders, but doing so without distillation. Sometimes, traditionally we had been relying on sending press releases to the media, and usually you get some of the information through, and there's obviously some additional color added. We wanted to have the opportunity to speak directly with our ridership, so we started this transparency initiative that really started out on social media, but we realized that we were hitting a wall because there's only so much you can put in a tweet or a Twitter
Right,
thread or
right.
something like that. So we kind of circled the wagons and we're like, well, how do we address it? How can we do a deeper dive? And that's where Spilling the Tea was born.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we started Metrospectives also during the pandemic, and I guess it was a way to pull back the curtain on, um, we're kind of unable to distill the message of what was going on with COVID. I thought it was a better idea to kind of hear the long form version of what was going on from people, from association presidents, from people out in the field. So it's interesting, it's a really good way to kind of disseminate information out to people. So I'm curious, what has feedback been like, and what are some of the things MBTA has done to grow listenership?
Initially, I think there was skepticism, and justifiably so. We hadn't done the best job of telling our message, and we were in a state where people didn't trust us. So we had to rebuild that. We knew it wouldn't be an overnight piece. There are plenty of people that said, stop, creating a podcast and fix the trains. Obviously, that's not my personal specialty, but I do understand. I understand the sentiment, and again, it was absolutely founded. But we found that over time, that sentiment started improving because we were educating people on what was actually going on. So that was really kind of, I guess, a major part of why we were doing it to begin with. As far as growing that ridership, I'm sorry, growing the listenership, I think it kind of went hand in hand. Very much word of mouth to begin with. Our only promotion at the time was through the social media posts that announced that they went out.
Right.
We have some digital signage in our stations, and we put it up on there to kind of get people, just curious enough to want to tune in. But the listenership has grown, the sentiment has definitely improved, and for me, one of the pieces of validation was there was recently a public meeting that was held regarding, I believe it was our South Coast Rail project, where we opened up a brand new line. And I was not present at the event, but thankfully someone recorded it. And there was a person from the town who got on the mic and said, you guys need to do a better job of promoting your podcast because you guys go into such great detail um, about the goings on of the organization. I feel like this is how I can get really good information on the MBTA.
Mhm.
It's one of those like, hey, people are actually listening. It's not just the little
Yeah,
listener numbers that we see.
right.
There's actually a human being that is telling me that they're listening, but they're finding the value that we're hoping to achieve as well.
And from, being in customer service and being involved with kind of the feedback of customers, how much did that play a role into creating this podcast, and how much of a role does that feedback play in coming up with topics and ideas, for your episodes?
It's huge. So under my purview is also social media.
Mhm.
So we kind of have that constant relationship with our ridership. We use social listening to see what kind of trends are bubbling up. We're interacting with our riders on a daily basis, and we're getting to see all of their concerns, and hopefully find ways to touch upon those and address those concerns during future episodes. So we very much try to make sure that whatever podcast is going out is fairly related to the current state of things. So initially, when we were first getting going, we're like, let's record 3 podcast episodes. We'll keep them on reserve, and then we'll just trickle them out.
Right.
Well, life moves pretty quickly, especially for a transit agency. Things were happening at a rate where we had an episode that was about our efforts to address hiring because we had a problem with hiring. Never
Right.
saw the light of day because we ended up fixing that gap. Thankfully, the governor and general manager, they approved a rate increase for them, and then all of a sudden, everyone wanted to come and get the job. So it didn't really make sense. I'm like, wow, we really have to be more in the moment, which makes it a little bit more of a challenge.
Hmm.
But we think that added, in the moment value is the better path forward for us. So we try to plan for like the next couple of episodes, but we always have a little bit of fluidity and flexibility to be able to adjust to whatever might be happening in the world.
Yeah. I'm curious too, kind of maybe your thoughts on the state of social media and transit agencies now. I know it's an effective way to communicate delays and that sort of thing. What kind of role do you feel social media is playing in kind of making the agency better, if at all?
Well, I think, for me, social media with transit agencies, but brands in general, it provides an opportunity for a brand to be something more than a logo. And we're able to, you know, humanize the MBTA by showing that we're not just the letter T. We are, you know, all types of people working and living in the communities that we serve, working all around the clock to provide the service that people, can sometimes take for granted. People who are working to make it better. And I think that's probably the biggest piece. And it's also by owning the narrative and that unique ability to do that through social media. By owning that narrative, we're able to move beyond certain conversations that might have persisted in the past, where maybe, again, maybe there's just someone had a negative experience, it's just negative, negative, negative.
Mhm.
We're able to highlight the positive. We can absolutely, and we absolutely do acknowledge any shortcomings that we do have, and those do definitely pop up. But it allows us to, again, focus on the human component, talk about the positivity, even if it's just working towards something and not just, cutting the ribbon, but the process to get there. And that's been a very unique shift, I think, in the approach to communications at the MBTA.
And I bet walking that line is very difficult because it's kind of the old adage, you do a good job, no one says anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yep.
And I'm interested with logistics, and I'm sure maybe some people listening or watching this will be too, especially your peers. Can you talk a little bit about the background that you brought to the table, maybe the issues or difficulties or not so much that, but it's sort of the hurdles that you had to kind of overcome to start this podcast, and what it took to kind of get into that, and also getting buy-in from the rest of the team.
It's easy to have a good idea.
Right.
Execution's usually the difficult part, and this was no exception. We have a small team on my team. I'm on the digital
Mhm.
strategy team. It's myself and 2 other full-time employees who also are responsible for all the video production for the MBTA, all social media content production, community management. blah blah blah. So their plates were already quite full.
Right.
So before I went to anyone above, I talked to my team and I said, "Hey, this is something I think you get some benefit for, but I need your help to make this a reality." And they were willing to step up. It's been a struggle just because it is what it is. It's added work.
Right.
There's only so many hours of the day, but I've been very fortunate to get that buy-in and support internally.
And as far as getting filling on board and getting other people, how willing are people to get behind the mic? I found that people are, even with the video camera off, people are actually reticent to do that. So how much have they been excited and kind of fueled by this by having an opportunity to get the word out on certain topics and things.
I think the proof of concept did a lot of heavy lifting, truth be told. Thankfully, we were able to convince Phil that he was the only option for a first episode because people
Yeah,
needed to hear from him, especially given where we were
right.
as an organization. But thankfully, our Secretary of Transportation, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, she was also another staunch advocate for us, and she was willing to join for our second episode. So we have the two kind of most prominent transportation figures in the state of Massachusetts who are willing to get on board. It sets a great precedent for others to want to do the same. And it's funny in the beginning, it was like, oh, I don't know if I could do that, and now it's become kind of this like, ooh, like people start pitching me to see if they can get on the show. And I think that just kind of continues to exponentially. It's like, again, it's a slow build, but I think we're kind of going in the right direction.
And all this has culminated in an APTA AdWheel Award. Can
Correct.
you talk a little bit about winning that award and maybe what it's done for the podcast, internally and maybe externally?
So APTA, the American Public Transportation Association, every year they have their marketing and communications, what they call the ad wheel. So it's just kind of their award system, and basically every transportation system that you've ever heard of is a member. We submitted this, in hopes of kind of seeing what the larger population of public transportation would think, and we ended up bringing it home first place, which was fantastic for us because it was a validation of the work that was going through, but it's also that nice validation from your peers. I think a lot of people are quite surprised by how small the team is,
Right,
how little equipment we have, how we don't have a dedicated space,
right.
but that we're still able to produce award-winning content. And that's kind of again it's a nice motivator to keep going. It is not the end result. We don't do this to get the award. We do this to inform our riders and make sure that the people of Massachusetts know what's going on with their transportation system. But it is that nice reassurance that you're going in the right direction. Because you never know with online content. You produce it, you send it out into the world, and you hope for the best. This is a really nice way to know that we're doing the right thing and we're on the right trajectory.
Yeah. And how does this kind of fit in with the bigger picture of customer success or the idea of customer success? What other things is MBTA doing to ensure the customer is informed and to kind of facilitate and make some of that feedback that you're getting a reality so that they feel more satisfied and more apt to use the system?
It's a multi-pronged approach. It's really all hands on deck. We have a design team that's producing signage to let people know about things that are happening on the system, upcoming public meetings, system closures, programs that might be available to them for reduced fares or anything to like. Just general positive sentiment, promotions for rider surveys, which then can also feed information. We have teams that are dedicated solely on communications and go out into the communities and meet with people to hear their feedback, let them know how things that are changing on our system might be affecting them, whether it be short term or long term. It's really everything and everything. You know, Paid social ads. It's really trying to hit on every touch point because everyone's got a different approach.
Yeah. And so maybe wrapping it up, what's next for Spilling the Tea? What are some maybe some goals that you have, projected guests, what sort of things coming up down the road?
Sure. Obviously, we always want to increase our listenership because we want to get the message out to a larger number of people. So we're
Mhm.
always trying to find ways to get more people to tune in and subscribe. We do have some visuals that are on our system just because we own the space, so it's easier and free to do.
Right.
So wherever we can get the message out for free, billboards. We have some Department of Transportation on billboards that we're able to use, so we're going to start utilizing that. As far as the show itself, um, for us, I think we to start we focus very heavily on MBTA leadership, probably just to add some additional value, some additional source of truth, kind of esteem to the podcast. But I think we're looking to broaden the circle a little bit.
Okay.
We most recently just had a state senator come on board, and he was talking about what the MBTA means for the communities that he represents,
Mhm.
and how those individual pieces could make an impact for him. Our next guest will be a public advocate who's going to talk about all sorts of things that are somewhat controversial in the transportation space. But again, we welcome that conversation. But I would also like to go beyond that, bring some riders, bring some frontline employees,
Mhm.
just add some different perspectives. And I love our leadership team. We have a very solid leadership team, but it's important to bring other people into the conversation to get their perspectives as well.
Well, great. And I think lastly, for your peers, people that are reticent to want to do something like this, maybe camera shy, microphone shy, what kind of advice would you give to them, to get them to maybe try this, at their own agency?
Honestly, for me, it's are you prepared to do the work? It is going to be work,
Mhm.
but if it's something you're thinking about and you think it could add some value to your organization, just do it. Just jump in, get started. It does not have to be perfect on episode one. It is always going to be a learning process, just like it is with anything in life. Go find your favorite YouTuber, go find your favorite podcast, listen to their first episode and listen to their most recent one. I
Right.
guarantee there's been a lot of evolution and improvement during that time. And the same thing could be true for you. I can only hope the same thing will be true for us, and that
Right.
we'll keep getting better with every episode. But the most important thing is to start, and even if it's difficult to get to keep it going, keep it going.
Yeah. And it's fun too. I mean,
It
I
is
think,
fun. I enjoy
yeah.
it. My favorite part is that I learn something every time. So,
Right.
I don't know the answers to the questions that I ask.
Right.
I know some things around the area, but obviously I'm asking the experts themselves. So for me, it's a super enjoyable process because I get to understand the company I work for that much better.
Mhm.
I am a everyday rider of the MBTA, so I understand the system that I rely on that much more. So it's a completely unified piece, and then we just touch the entirety of the Commonwealth. So it's great to know what the road ahead looks like uh, for the entire state. So it's a really enjoyable thing.
Yeah. Great, Andrew. Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Alex.